Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. When I spoke at the Turning Point USA gathering in Phoenix only a week ago, I specifically in my remarks called for the prosecution of those who I said, and to this day believe, engaged in a seditious conspiracy to remove a duly elected president of the United States. That same enduring conspiracy went on to stage 2 completely fraudulent impeachments, then went on to, I believe, steal the 2020 election, then morphed into the January 6th fiasco, and then ended up in the Jack Smith investigation and attempted prosecution of Donald Trump regarding January 6th, and also regarding his retention of classified documents, which under the Presidential Records Act, President Trump was entitled to keep any place he wanted, and that included Mar-a-Lago. There's been enormous criticism of Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche for not taking action against those who clearly plotted to remove Donald Trump from the presidency. Today, however, there was some good news. Attorney General Pam Bondi released a message sending a clear and indisputable comment that the era of political weaponization inside the federal government is indeed going to come to an end. Bondi, in her statement today, made to Just the News, said that her office has now launched a sweeping investigation into what she described as years of coordinated lawfare carried out during the Obama and Biden administrations. The focus is on whether federal agencies were weaponized to protect political allies while targeting conservatives like myself, like General Michael Flynn, like President Donald Trump and his family, as well as other Trump supporters. Bondi revealed that federal prosecutors are examining what she called a, quote, 10-year stain on the Justice Department, one that may amount to an ongoing seditious criminal conspiracy. By treating the abuse of power as a continuing offensive, investigators can pursue accountability even for actions that would otherwise fall outside the statute of limitations. This is an absolutely crucial point. For those who say that we're running out of time, while we may be running out of time to prosecute those who basically orchestrated the January 6th fiasco, that's a legal question we'll turn to in a second, I believe, based on my conversations with noted constitutional lawyers like David Schoen and others, that there is no constitutional limit on the broader question of seditious conspiracy. As Attorney General Bondi correctly notes, the evidence has already uncovered paints a disturbing picture. Thanks to Tulsi Gabbard, who currently serves as the Director of National Intelligence, she declassified all the documents that could have been declassified in President Trump's first term, but for some reason, CIA Director John Radcliffe, who was then the National Security Advisor, did not do so. Bondi says that federal law enforcement shielded political elites like Hunter Biden and Hillary Clinton while aggressively pursuing conservatives using questionable warrants, surveillance tactics, and politically motivated investigations. Bondi confirmed that internal FBI documents show that even agents doubted the legal ramifications and justification of the raid on Mar-a-Lago by President Trump, but the Justice Department carried out that raid anyway. Attorney General Bondi credited her department with releasing unprecedented volumes of documentation to Congress, exposing what she called a two-tiered justice system. She said no one is above the law, and that includes those who believe they could weaponize government against political opponents. The Attorney General also took aim at former CIA Director John Brennan, accusing him of trying to interfere with ongoing grand jury investigations by seeking judicial intervention. This is almost unbelievable. John Brennan, the Islamic convert, the admitted communist, the CIA director who really was the major orchestrator of the Russian collusion hoax, has actually asked a federal judge in the southern district of Florida to intervene and end an ongoing grand jury investigation into his actions. Well, on the one hand, I salute Attorney General Bondi for initiating this conversation and this investigation. It's been a long time coming. But if there are not dozens of deep state spooks put behind bars relatively quickly, and I mean before the midterms, well, then a massive justice will have been failed and a political opportunity will have been squandered. This investigation cannot be the typical federal stalling gambit that's designed just to kick the can down the road. We need indictments, we need trials, and we need them quickly. It's time to lock these criminals up. In the meantime, Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, Harmeet Dillon, who I both know and like, assured President Trump's supporters that justice for the crimes committed by the January 6th committee will come. This was music to my ears because I can tell you definitively that the one-sided January 6th committee used totally AI-fabricated audios and videos to put words in my mouth, words that I never actually said. In fact, an FBI investigation into January 6th concluded that neither Alex Jones or I had either known in advance about, condoned, or approved, or participated in any illegal action on January 6th or any other day for that matter. So this is an interesting exchange. Harmeet Dillon was responding to a post from conservative influencer Gunther Eagleman, another friend of mine, who reminded Attorney General Pam Bondi that the statute of limitations on the January 6th members it was about to expire. He wrote, "Dear Pam Bondi, please don't let the statute of limitations run out on the January 6th criminals. There are only 12 more days," he wrote. "They all need to be held accountable for the treason they submitted. 78 million Americans who voted for President Trump join me in this demand. Please do not let the statute of limitations run out. They all need to be held accountable for the treason they committed." Now, Trump and Bondi say they are working to bring justice to those who weaponized January 6th, according to Dillon. No statute of limitations will hinder the Department of Justice's efforts to bring justice to those who weaponized persecution of American citizens on January 6th, and there is not a deadline for DOJ to bring prosecutions. I must admit that I am a little confused, but I'm at a disadvantage because I am a non-lawyer. Well, maybe that's actually an advantage. But according to Dillon, she says, "My boss, Pam Bondi, works around the clock to bring justice for all Americans," she continued. "Don't be a hater and a simp for weaponized online disinformation." Now, look, I think that the January 6th committee is one of the greatest scandals of all time. The January 6th committee conducted its investigation without bipartisan oversight. So they used selectively presented evidence. They failed to preserve key records. They falsified a number of records. They buried key information, which would have told a much broader story, one of a Fedsurrection. The committee also declined to examine security failures at the Capitol. They failed to investigate the role of congressional leadership and law enforcement decisions that were made prior to January 6th. Federal prosecutors relied on expanded and novel legal theories to charge defendants, including nonviolent individuals, while imposing prolonged pretrial detention in countless cases. Lives were destroyed, lives were ruined, and there must be some accountability and justice. The Department of Justice and the FBI also coordinated closely with the committee through their entire investigation, using January 6th as the basis for sweeping surveillance, prosecutions, and sentencing strategies that treated political protest as domestic extremism. The campaign destroyed the lives of thousands of Americans, leading many into depression, physical illness, and even suicide. I pray that Harmeet Dillon is right. I pray that justice is indeed coming. Meanwhile, proving that one person can make a difference, Nick Shirley, who is a 20-something independent journalist whose findings and research are found mostly on social media, has almost single-handedly uncovered a growing multi-million-dollar scandal in the state of Minnesota. This political scandal is now engulfing the Somali-born Congresswoman Ilhan Omar as serious questions mount over her family's sudden wealth, her husband's business dealings, and a massive taxpayer-funded fraud that unfolded right under her watch, as well as the watch of Governor Tim Walz, of course, in Minnesota. According to multiple reports now, Omar went from having a negative net worth when she entered Congress to being worth as much as $30 million in just a few years. This is a stunning financial turnaround that coincides with one of the largest COVID-era welfare fraud schemes in U.S. history. That scheme, which exploited federal pandemic food programs, child care programs, and transportation programs, has so far led to nearly 90 criminal charges, many tied to individuals in Omar's circle in her own district. It was new reporting from Nick Shirley showing how dozens of healthcare and child care operations received millions of our tax dollars when in fact they were inoperable, oftentimes with businesses located in empty buildings with no hint of any staffers or any administration or any patients or consumers. This scandal is not, unfortunately, limited to Minnesota. We now have evidence that there are unlimited scandals in Ohio, in Michigan, in Washington State. Before this is over, I think this will balloon to be $1 billion scandal right under our own noses. This is, of course, exactly what Elon Musk was uncovering in his Doge expositions, his Doge exposures. Several of the fraudsters charged in Minnesota had personal or political connections to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Others were major donors to her campaign, while others worked on her elections. At the center of renewed scrutiny, in this case, is Omar's husband, political consultant Tim Minette. His venture capital firm, Rose Lake Capital, reportedly ballooned in value from being not worth nearly nothing to being worth tens of millions of dollars in a very short span, all while operating out of a Washington, D.C. Temporary office space and quietly removing the names of high-profile Democratic insiders from its website. Critics note that this financial surge followed Ilhan Omar's push for the Meals Act, legislation that loosened oversight of federal food aid programs during COVID. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats, also pushed hard for the loosened oversight of these federal food programs, as well as increased payments. Prosecutors now say that those relaxed rules were exploited by fraudsters who billed the government and the taxpayers for millions of meals that were never actually served and eaten. Now abundantly clear that Omar is just another Somali fraudster, just another parasite looking for another avenue to grift and extract money from the host population. It's time to lock her up, or better yet, deport her, because I believe she lied on her immigration documents and was in fact married to her own brother to justify her immigration to the United States. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Stone Zone.
This shrimp and coconut sauce is divine. What's your secret?
Goya coconut milk.
How does it taste so good?
It's all in that real coconut flavor and that rich, creamy texture.
What about thickeners and added sugars?
None. Just smooth, coconutty goodness.
What can I make with it?
From curries to sweet treats like coconut flan, the possibilities are endless.
Goya coconut milk. Take your cooking to the next level. No question about it. Find it in the Goya section of your local grocery store. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. New York Attorney General Letitia James is once again facing scrutiny over deep financial ties to far-left billionaire George Soros, as new campaign finance records reveal the extent of his influence behind her political rise. Since 2019, Soros and his family members have poured more than $71,000 directly into James' campaign coffers, including $31,000 this year alone, as she seeks another term. That includes $18,000 from George Soros himself, $13,000 from his daughter-in-law, Jennifer Soros. That may not seem like very much money, but it's an indicator that their powerful network is fully behind Letitia James. The Soros network has dropped tens of millions of dollars funneled through Soros-backed activist groups that aggressively shaped New York's entire political landscape. Now, a looming problem for Attorney General Letitia James are the millions of dollars that she raised through Act Blue. Act Blue is a Democrat payment processing company that collected millions and millions of dollars from various Democrat candidates. But very cleverly, they turned the feature in which you're required, if you're paying with a credit card or through Apple Pay, you were required to submit an address. Once that address matches the address on your credit card, you would be entitled to give. Unfortunately, Act Blue turned that function off, and therefore, when you go to the website, when you go to Letitia James's reports and you begin to trace these donations, you find a very high percentage of them, when you contact them directly or at their front step, say that they gave no such contributions. They're not familiar with Letitia James. In some cases, some will respond that they remember giving a contribution to Hillary Clinton, but that was years ago. Act Blue is one of the great unwritten scandals of our day, and I think you're going to find that a substantial amount of the money that boosted the candidacy of Letitia James was indeed from non-existent sources. Soros's Open Society Network has pumped nearly $24 million, meanwhile, into the radical left Working Families Party since 2016, while the party's New York branch received $900,000 more directly from Soros family members. Letitia James has long aligned herself with the group's far-left agenda, first winning office as a Working Families Party candidate before running statewide as a Democrat. Critics say the relationship explains James' aggressive and politically charged crusade against President Donald Trump, including her high-profile civil case accusing him of inflating his net worth, a case of blatant lawfare that was overturned in the appellate court. Letitia James is going to be hoisted on the same petard that she hoisted Donald Trump on. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. Well, President Donald Trump believes that a peace deal to end the war in Ukraine is closer than ever following a diplomatic meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at his Mar-a-Lago resort yesterday. While no agreement has yet been finalized, Trump signaled optimism, saying both sides want it to end, that talks are now in their final stages. Every American prays for the end to this meat grinder, this horrific war. Zelensky publicly thanked President Trump and his team, including envoy Steve Witkoff and his advisor, son-in-law Jared Kushner, for their continued engagement and their mediation. Zelensky said the discussions were productive and noted that roughly 90% of a draft peace plan framework had been agreed upon. Still, major sticking points evidently remain, particularly over territory in eastern Ukraine as well as long-term security guarantees. President Trump acknowledged those challenges, saying the remains issues are thorny, but insisted that progress is indeed being made. I think it is abundantly clear that the American people are tired of paying for this war. They're particularly tired of the fact that there is a widespread belief that not all of the funds appropriated for this war have ended up in the war effort, much of it ending up in the pockets of Zelensky and his Confederates. Some of it, according to Elon Musk and my good friend Tim Burchett, member of Congress from Tennessee, ending up in the pockets of the very politicians here in the United States who voted to give this money. That needs to be an investigation, that's for sure. President Trump has confirmed that he spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin shortly before meeting Zelensky, describing that call as good and very productive. Now, President Trump, who I've known for 50 years, is above all a deal maker. He's a negotiator. President Trump said he believes that Putin wants to end the war, though he conceded that Russia has not backed away from all of its demands. The meeting came amid renewed Russian missile and drone strikes on Kyiv, the major city in Ukraine, which left several dead and knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. While European leaders condemned the attacks, President Trump declined to directly criticize Moscow, arguing that both sides have carried out military actions and that continued escalation will only prolong the war. The U.S. taxpayer is already footing billions in aid. President Trump's push for negotiations, rather than continued posturing and saber-rattling against Russia, is a long overdue attempt to put America's interests first. President Trump has artfully, I believe, positioned himself as a central figure capable of bringing both sides to the table and forcing a conversation that globalist insiders have been holding back on for years. I do think that an end to this war is in order. I think the president really knows that he has a great deal riding on it. But I was very disappointed to see Mike Pompeo undercut the president's peace initiative just minutes ago when I was looking on X, used to be known as Twitter. Mike Pompeo supporting continued war, supporting the continued corruption of Ukraine. I think most Americans want to see this war over. I pray that the president is successful. Peace seems to be closer than ever. But rather than just lay back and enjoy this period between Christmas and New Year's, President Trump is fully engaged. I believe he's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu today. This is a day after meeting with Zelensky. So the president continues to work for peace, and all Americans pray for his success. Meanwhile, the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, you're familiar with him. He's the illegal immigrant from El Salvador with noted ties to the violent MS-13 gang, who's been accused of smuggling other illegals in the U.S., continues to show how immigration is held hostage by liberal activist judges and attorneys who make a complete and utter mockery of the rule of law. While facing serious human smuggling charges, Abrego Garcia appeared in a TikTok video, lip-syncing to music, prompting outrage from DHS, that's the Department of Homeland Security officials, who believe this illegal alien is making a mockery of the entire notion of justice. The Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin responded to this disgusting video, noting that while federal authorities are under a court-imposed gag order, the accused is free to post on social media. I've been in this exact situation when I was charged in a fabricated case of lying to oath to Congress about Russian collusion that never actually existed. The judge put a gag order on me in which I was not allowed to defend myself in any public forum, not social media, not radio, not cable, not television. It was an outrage. Of course, when James Comey, the FBI director, was charged with the exact same crime that I was charged with, the court put no such restriction on him. Just like they raided my home at 6 o'clock in the morning. 29 heavily armed FBI agents in full SWAT gear wearing night goggles and swarming my home while brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons. James Comey, charged with the exact same crime as I was, well, he was allowed to saunter in 10 days later And he was allowed to surrender in private. No cameras or reporters allowed. That's the two-tiered justice system for you right there. We see it again in this case where you have a dangerous, illegal immigrant gang member who's allowed to taunt the government while the government is not allowed to respond. Tricia McLaughlin, the spokesman in this case for the Department of Homeland Security, said American justice ceases to function when its arbiters silence law enforcement and yet give megaphones to those who oppose our legal system. I couldn't agree more. Tom Homan is a good man. He's a tough man with a tough job. But President Trump continues to keep his commitment to expel dangerous illegals from the country. I do think that the priority has to be put on those who have proven criminal records, either in their country of origin or here in the United States. There are people in the United States who have been here for 25, 30 years, who are taxpayers, who are gainfully employed, in many cases in the same jobs over a long period of time, who have never violated the law. Exceptions were made for restaurant workers at one point. I think exceptions could be made for those in the area of agriculture. People with no criminal records, I think, should be treated differently than those who have an extensive criminal record, particularly in view of the fact that there are limited resources. So let's get the dangerous criminals out of the country first, and then we can deal with the questions of others who are here illegally. I do think there has to be some reason within this program. Albrego Garcia was previously deported to El Salvador early this year, only to be returned to the United States over an alleged procedural error. Last week, a federal judge temporarily halted further action, claiming that the prosecution of Garcia was vindictive. In other words, these liberals do anything to keep this illegal in the United States. They continue to refer to him as a Maryland man. He's not a resident of Maryland. He is a resident of El Salvador. He represents the ability of the left to undermine our current border policy. Albrego Garcia is a statement from the left that your country has been conquered and you will be replaced and you cannot vote your way out of it. Well, we hope to prove them wrong in next year's midterm elections. Perhaps we'll have to consider some other remedies. In the meantime, there is a major battle shaping up in Europe. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who's one of my personal heroes, of course that's because I am half Italian and half Hungarian. I'm Italian from the waist down. But the leading nationalist in Europe and a close friend of President Trump is warning that Europe is drifting dangerously close to war. And he says ordinary citizens are being kept in the dark about how serious the situation in Europe has become. Speaking on national television, Hungarian President Viktor Orban said that recent anti-war demonstrations in Hungary were against what he called a growing push by European elites to prepare for an open conflict with Russia. According to the Hungarian leader, recent European Union members have resembled a war council, with leaders openly discussing military escalations while ignoring the impact, economic impact, and potential human costs. Orban warned that the divide between the United States and Europe was widening considerably since President Donald Trump returned to office. Orban also said Washington has shown more restraint while Brussels continues to push a confrontational agenda. Orban said it was once unthinkable that America would say no and Europe would push ahead anyway, but that appears to be exactly what is happening. The Hungarian Prime Minister pointed to plans by European institutions to funnel nearly $90 billion more to Ukraine, money he says the EU does not currently have, which would force member states into crippling debt. Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic refused to back this plan, with Orban warning it will saddle Hungarian families with hundreds of billions of dollars in future liabilities and debt. He also accused European elites of ignoring the economic reality at home, arguing that energy costs, inflation, and stagnation are punishing the working families of Eastern Europe. Orban warned that seizing Russian assets or escalating the war could drag Europe into an irreversible conflict. On the domestic front, Orban contrasted Europe's war footing with Hungary's focus on stability, pointing to tax relief for the working families in his country, housing support, and energy price protections. Next year, Orban faces his greatest challenge yet from the globalists that hope to oust him from power and replace him with a controlled puppet who will support endless war with Ukraine, as well as provoking Russia to the detriment of the Hungarian people. We must hope that Orban prevails because no one in Europe is a stronger voice for the autonomy of the Hungarian people. And we have to ask a serious question as to whether NATO, which made perfect sense at the end of World War II, makes any sense at all. After all, after World War II, most of the economies of Europe were decimated, while America's economy was still relatively strong. Therefore, this joint defense compact that we entered into, NATO, made sense. Now, however, Donald Trump first pointed out in his first term that our NATO allies have failed to hold up their end of the bargain. In other words, the United States paid its dues, but thanks to Donald Trump insisting, the other members of NATO finally coughed up $650 million. The president has argued all the way back to 1988 as to why we should pick up the tab for the defense of Europe when the Europeans don't want to do so themselves. And if you look at their contributions to the Ukrainian war effort, you will see that that money has come disproportionately from the United States of America. Yet, Ukraine and Russia on the other side of the globe. We have to hope that Orban does win because, as I say, he's one of the few voices of reason in Europe, as many heads of state continue to clamor for World War III. Doing this as genocidal, Russian-hating globalist elites become drunker and drunker with power. It is interesting that they have to rig the elections in France to prohibit the election of a nationalist conservative. We have a nationalist, more pro-U.S. president in Italy. Once again, conservative parties gained in the most recent election in Germany. The left is running out of time, but they want to get their hands on that $90 billion, which allegedly will flow to Ukraine. But many of the NATO nations believe that this money will flow back to them, theoretically, for the rebuilding of their national defense. I'm not buying it. So keep an eye on Viktor Orban. He is the most impressive of the European leaders. I don't say that just because I'm half Hungarian, but Hungary is a country like Poland, like Romania, which has never allowed any form of Islamic immigration, which is why those may be the three most stable countries in Europe today. Anyway, you're listening to the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. Here we talk politics, news, history, and you get the inside scoop on what's really happening in Washington. Whether it's happening in Washington, whether it's happening in Mar-a-Lago, we are on top of it right here in the Stone Zone, and we ask you to join us 5 days a week. I'm Roger Stone. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial because, well, we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now re-entering the Stone Zone. Well, the entire nation woke up this past Monday to a political firestorm after a bombshell investigation by citizen journalist Nick Shirley went viral, racking up more than 100 million views in just days. The reporting focuses on fraud tied to Somali-linked daycare and social service operations in the state of Minnesota, with Shirley examining entities accusing of siphoning millions of dollars in taxpayer funds through leasely regulated welfare programs. Again, a citizen journalist in his 20s went to the facilities and confirmed that there were scams. They were providing no services to the community, with swarthy sub-Saharan swindlers blathering gibberish at him and calling him a criminal for simply asking questions. The explosive nature of the findings has ignited public outrage and a new examination of whether similar scams are taking place in other states, notably Michigan, Ohio, and Washington State, where there are now already reports of tens of millions of dollars of alleged abuse. This proves what many taxpayers have already suspected, that there's a complete breakdown in oversight inside our U.S. federal government. When taxpayers flow with minimal accountability, corruption becomes part and parcel of the system. Import the third world and you become the third world, as the old adage goes. One thing worth notice is how the corporate media has gone completely silent over this multi-million-dollar fraud. Before it's over, I believe the number in Minnesota will not be 10 million, but will be closer to 50 million or more. So one must ask, where is the New York Times? Where is the Washington Post? Where is the Wall Street Journal? Where is CNN? Where is MSNBC? I mean, I don't get my news from CNN for the same reason I don't drink out of the toilet. But they have ignored what will turn out to be one of the greatest single billion-dollar scams in American fiscal history. At this point, the facts are very hard to ignore. What's particularly striking is how this mirrors the recent efforts by Elon Musk and others to uncover waste and fraud at the federal level. Efforts that were met with coordinated political attacks and even violence against some of the Tesla facilities. You recall that, no, don't you? Now, a new model is emerging. Tech investors and independent journalists are now openly discussing the creation of a crowd-funded, decentralized network of citizen investigators, a Doge-style effort aimed at exposing corruption in deep blue states. If this model takes hold, it could overwhelm the political establishment and create an atmosphere for actual reform. Patriots, it's time to enlist in the information war. Start locally by exposing your local tyrants. Get out your cell phone and start asking questions. My heartiest congratulations to Nick Shirley, who racked up far more than 100 million views now on his initial video. And he has set a standard as citizen journalists in other states begin to examine these fraudulent COVID-19 related programs. It's going to turn out to be one of the greatest fiscal scandals in the history of the country, and it all started with a 28-year-old. I'm still waiting for the New York Times. I guess I can wait a long time. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump revealed the United States took out what he described as a major drug facility tied to Venezuela's narco-state regime. For those who are watching the situation in Venezuela, I think it's very important to recognize that this fight is not about regime change. This is about the fact that the Maduro regime is like a mafia state, and this is a Marxist narco-trafficking operation that is importing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of death into the United States. President Donald Trump has every justification to take out Maduro and end the flow of deadly drugs into the United States. You heard it here first on the Stone Zone. Some may argue that this is Bush-style regime change. I say that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, President Donald Trump are absolutely right, and that there is, at this time, without any question, a moral imperative because of the drugs coming into our country to remove Maduro from power. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.